All right, good morning. Welcome to Christ Church, Church of All Lifting Lives, Elevating Christ, a church for those who aren't here yet. I'm Pastor Andrew. I'm glad that you're here now, joining us here in the West Auditorium. Good morning to all of you, of course, who are over worshiping in East as well. And good morning to all of you worshiping online, all the families who are on spring break this week in somewhere sunny and warm. Good morning. Thanks for tuning into church as well. Great to have you here this morning, specifically as we prepare and as we get ready for Easter in front of us. Do make the invitation to you all. Please join us for Easter, join us for some of these services, and we are a church for those not here yet. That's part of who we are as Christ Church. And so please, regular attenders, covenant members, embody that. Live into invitation. Live into what it means to serve. Live into what we've been discussing in these last few weeks as we've been walking through and looking at the wheel together. And that's what we've been doing as a church body. As a reminder for you, if this is your first time, you can catch up quick. We've been looking at, as a church body, how we live. We're in this special season called Lent. It's a historic tradition throughout the Christian calendar where we set aside weeks leading up to Easter to do a special measure of reflection, looking at our lives, looking at the ways in which we live and our faith practice for those of us who are Christians. And so this Lenten time is really important in the Christian calendar, getting us ready for Easter. As a local church, specifically as Christ Church, we've been taking this time to examine how we live and the various practices, habits, and disciplines that make up our lives. Just a reminder for you, it's not how we live that actually makes you a Christian. It is our faith. We are saved by grace through faith. It is Jesus Christ and how he lived, how he died, how he sacrificed himself and rose from the grave. That's what makes us his people. That's what makes us Christian, is him and his call on our lives. That's what makes us a Christian. However, it doesn't mean that how you live doesn't matter. It matters tremendously. The various disciplines that you embrace in how you live is what makes you appear and live into being more Christ-like. You learn. The word disciple means to learn or be a learner. We are disciples, learners of Jesus, learning how to live like him, be like him, and embrace what he wants for our lives and for this world. And so the various disciplines that we've been talking about on the wheel are that which cultivate that Christ-like life. And we've got 5 specific words that we've identified, disciplines that we embrace as a church body. Worship, invite, serve, give, and rest. And if you missed any, you can always go back and listen to any. We're on our last one this morning, and we're going to be looking at worship. That's what we're going to be looking at, worship. Now, when we begin the conversation around worship, it's one of those kind of funny things in that people have a certain connotation or suggestion of ideology that comes with each of these words, but certainly with worship. When we say, I worship, you probably mean I show up at 9 o'clock on Sundays, as an example, or I show up at 8 o'clock, or I show up at 10:30 on Sundays. And we assume, that's for those of us at Christ Church, we assume worship is the showing up on Sundays to be part of a local church experience or local church expression. That is true. That is worship. Please keep doing that, okay? It's very valuable, terribly so. We're going to talk about it this morning. But worship is far more than that as well. Don't limit your sense and understanding of worship to a simple definition, but be willing to engage a much more robust, a rich, a much healthier, and more encompassing definition of what worship actually means in your life and in the life of us as Christian people. I mean, there's individual worship and there's corporate worship. Corporate is when we're together. Inside of corporate worship, we worship throughout the week at various times. We're going to be doing it later on Monday, Thursday, Good Friday, and of course on Sunday mornings. We worship at multiple hours and in multiple styles and in multiple rooms. And even within that, there are multiple parts to worship. There's singing, there's praying, there's giving, there's preaching, there's communion. These are all aspects of how we worship as God's people. So don't limit your definition of worship, but see worship as rich and complex and beautiful and intended to be a part of your life. Now, the interesting thing is that for as complex as our definition of worship really truly is, it is actually very consistent and simple what people get wrong when it comes to worship. As complex as worship is and can be, it is very simple and very consistent what people get wrong. And the number one thing that people get wrong when it comes to worship is direction. Direction? Yes, direction. I'm not talking about GPS. I'm not talking about, oh, my hubby's terrible at directions. I get that enough. That's not what I'm talking about, though, okay? I'm talking about direction as it relates to our worship and the worship of our God. Let me show you what I mean. Here's an example for you that connotates and suggests one type or style of worship that was popular and is popular beyond and outside of Christianity. This is true for a lot of pagan religions and a lot of other religions that are out there. And if you go back to, for example, where the biblical story unfolded in ancient Mesopotamia, a lot of the religious worship practices of that day and in that specific area looked like this. You would have a person, you would have humanity, a group of people, a village. You'd have a village. And the village would often have a deity, a god, or maybe even multiple gods, like a pantheon. And the village would go to the god and would do something for the god in order to get something from the god. It was very transactional, okay? So you would go to your little local deity and you would say, hey, we need it to rain. And so here you go, take this offering of grain or take this animal sacrifice or whatever it might be, and we expect to get back from you water from the heavens. We expect to get back from you rain that will fertilize our fields and our crops. Now, this is particularly important if you come from an agrarian culture. I mean, they didn't have what we have, right? They didn't have grocery stores set up, and it wasn't that same methodology. It was like, hey, you live and die by what you literally pull out of your backyard, okay? And so this worship practice developed where you would have a transaction between you and a deity. Best example I can give you out of history as an example for you, this is true across different cultures, but in Greek mythology, there's Agamemnon, for those of you who know this. Ever watched the movie Troy or anything like that? This is in some of the famous Greek plays. Agamemnon went to the goddess Artemis and actually sacrificed his daughter in order to have Artemis calm the seas so that his invading army could go across the Aegean Sea and invade Troy, okay? So he gave up something that mattered to him in order to get something from the goddess to make his life and purpose accomplished. That's transactional worship. And before you knock it too hard, it still is around today and even creeps its way into Christianity. Have you ever prayed the prayer and expected something out of God in return? Have you ever prayed before and expected God to give you what you want? Like, God, I did this for you. I prayed this prayer. Isn't that how this works? I prayed and now you give me? No, that's transactional, and that's very shallow theology and shallow relationship. And that's not the heart of who our God is. So we have to be on guard against it. The Jewish people take this in a different direction, appreciatively so. Our roots are in our Jewish heritage, and they develop a relationship with our one true God. That's what we believe in. We believe in one true God. And this one true God actually took the initiative and did things for the Jewish people. Rather than the Jewish people coming to God, God actually went to Abraham, and all these stories in the Old Testament of God going to the Jewish people and healing and saving and rescuing and promising and working in the Jewish people's lives. God was the one who took the initiative and took the step towards people. However, in the relationship, God gave the people a number of laws, a number of rules, the 10 Commandments and 613 laws that guided and established the Jewish way of life. And the idea was that because God had gone to them and done something for them directionally, they in turn would do something for God. That again, it was like this back and forth. There was a sense of mutuality, but it was always this almost conditional mutuality, in that if the people stopped following the 10 Commandments, stopped following the laws, stopped living the Jewish way of life, then God would sever the connection. Or they would sever the connection if God didn't do what he was supposed to do. And there was this tension in the relationship because God had gone to them and that they felt, gosh, if we ever mess up or make a mistake with these rules, we're in trouble. And so there was almost a a fear-based reality underneath, and people became obsessed with following the rules. They became absolutely, utterly, completely consumed by following the rules and around following the rules because they were afraid of what might happen if they didn't. And they became so obsessed about following the rules that they forgot the God who gave them the rules. And they took their eyes off of the ways in which God had been working in their life, and they focused only on the rules. God tried to speak to them. He tried to get through to them. In fact, he sent prophets. He sent a number of prophets to help grab their attention with how they were living and so forth. One such prophet or man who spoke for God, his name was Hosea, and he says this. God says this through Hosea to the Jewish people. He says, I want you to show love, not offer sacrifices. I want you to live in a loving and gracious way. I don't want just simply the rules to be followed. I want your heart of love that's supposed to move you into the rules. Like, I want you to know me, to know my story, to know my character, to know that I love you. I don't just want your burnt offerings. I want you to know me and know my love, and not just follow the rules. This too can creep into Christianity and into practices today. You've ever heard of the term lip service, to pay lip service? Sometimes Christians are in a position in their life where they come to church and they offer lip service. They do all the things they're supposed to do, church aerobics, sit, stand, sing, all that sort of stuff. And yet we sometimes miss out on knowing God, loving him and being loved by him. And this is where Christianity becomes truly unique and beautiful, because of the direction. Christianity is neither transactional nor conditional in its worship. Worship for us is something totally different. It's something that goes to work on us more than God. It's something that changes us, influences us, moves in us, and moves through us into the lives of the people around us. The direction is recognizing that God does something for us in our well-being, and then we in turn share that love, share that grace, share that message with others. Worship for us it's not like God needs your worship. He doesn't need it. He's not sitting up in some heavenly throne like, yeah, give it to me, cool. He doesn't need his ego pumped, okay? What he desires is that you know him. That you know him and what he has done for you, to you. And he desires that you show that same love unto others. Let me give you the best example I can. It's on Palm Sunday. Today is Palm Sunday, historic tradition of recognizing Palm Sunday within the life of the church. This is the moment in time where Jesus came into the city of Jerusalem. It's recorded in all four of the Gospels. The Gospel is a first-hand eyewitness account, life, death, resurrection of Jesus. And in this specific account that we're going to look at is in the Gospel of Luke. The Gospel of Luke, let me set it up for you, but the Gospel of Luke has about its pinnacle moment is about halfway through, or has this very famous line where it says, Jesus turned his face towards Jerusalem, like literally. But it means far more than just like turn his face towards Jerusalem. Means more than he started a journey towards Jerusalem. It does mean that, but it means so much more than that as well, right? It means that, gosh, Jesus turned his attention, his focus, and his sense of trajectory towards Jerusalem and all that waited for him there. He began to shift, his ministry took a turn as he now shifted towards, his trajectory was pointed towards the cross, the tomb, and Easter morning. It happens in the book of Luke. And so Jesus, he does this of his own choice, of his own volition. He doesn't do, his followers weren't like, hey, Jesus, I got this idea for a cross. What do you think? Hey, Jesus, I could really use X, Y, Z. There was no transaction. There was no conditional piece here. This was Jesus choosing, because of who he was, to come to Jerusalem and all that waited for him there. This is God. Directionally, this is Jesus, God, coming to the people of Jerusalem and the people of this world because of who he is and his love for you. God to people. And it took place on Palm Sunday when we see this and we recognize this. We notice this. Jesus is riding on a donkey, and he comes in on a donkey to the city of Jerusalem. And as he's preparing, as he's getting closer to Jerusalem, he gets more and more followers, crowds start to follow him. And so you get this sense that there's a lot of people who've been traveling with him, and then the city itself is like, whoa, something's happening. You know, people are tweeting about this. There's TikToks about this. This is going out. Every channel is getting this, like, this guy, Jesus, is coming. And so when he arrives, it's celebration, it's declaration, it's shouting in the streets. It says this in the gospel. When Jesus reached the place where the road started down the Mount of Olives, and all of his followers began to shout and sing as they walked along, praising God for all the wonderful miracles that they had seen. They began to worship, declaring, praising, shouting, praying, Hosanna. Here's what they said. Blessings on the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest heaven. And they began to wave palm branches and throw their cloaks down. Why? Why were they doing this? It's not like Jesus didn't know what was going on. You think Jesus needed this? Jesus did not need to be reminded of what was taking place. His face was set on Jerusalem and the cross and the resurrection. This isn't for Jesus' well-being. This worship is for their own well-being as they recognize, receive, and lay claim to what God is doing for themselves. Even more than that, they're declaring it to each other, to their other followers of Jesus, that they might be encouraged, built up, that they too might see and might know the significance of this moment in time and to recognize what God is doing. This is being declared. They are an oppressed, overwhelmed people. They've got a foreign government in charge. They've been waiting for a Messiah for literally centuries, and it's finally happening. And so the Jewish people at this moment in time are declaring unto themselves, it's happening! Woohoo! And they are being changed, transformed, as they believe more and more in the significance of the moment as God is working in the person of Jesus. Worship is changing their faith. And it is even bringing faith into more people. I mean, I picture the woman sticking her head out the window being like, what's all the racket, you know? And she sees the people waving branches and it's like, people are, hey, the Messiah's here! And there's this excitement and joy as they share what God is doing and has done. And she starts to believe. And the beggar on the side of the road is caught up in the excitement. And he starts to believe. And the children running in the streets pause playing. And they realize something amazing is happening. And they start to believe. Worship in the sense of a Christian context is not this empty lip service. It is not this transactional peace exchange between you and God. It is recognizing what God has done and is doing for you and declaring it to yourself and to others. That's what Christian worship truly is. And it's because God doesn't need our worship, but we do. Worship is something we need, and the people around us, literally sitting beside you, need. Because our faith is frail, and we face tough stuff, and we get overwhelmed, because we face sickness and disease, and we look at politics, and we look at religion, and we look at our communities, and we're struggling with our kids, or with our school, or mom and dad are passing away, or whatever it might be that we are facing, and in our frailty and in our own brokenness, we question, we wonder, we doubt, we feel insecure, we feel shame, we feel regret, and we begin to depreciate ourselves and the life God has given. And if we're not careful, we can lose sight of who God is, knowing Him and what He's done for each one of you. And so we sing on Sunday mornings. Why? To declare to ourselves that you have a King. You have a God. You have been swept up in the same redemption story. We sing and we pray so that the people beside us, when they're hurting and lonely and starving and struggling, are grounded in knowing God and God's love for them. When we pray the Lord's Prayer, pray it out loud, please. Why? Because someone beside you needs it. When you sing, sing. Because you need it. And the people in this room, and the people online, and the people all over this world, the people even outside of the church, the people not here yet need your worship. Because of the way that your worship can bring faith into their lives. So sing loudly, sing and pray and give and serve. Worship with passion and zeal. Because someday you're probably going to come into church and you won't feel like you want to worship. You ever felt that before? I have. But you come anyways. Why? Because you need to know God and His love for you. Christian worship is this joyous occasion where we recognize and declare to ourselves and to others who God is and what He has done for each one of us. And nothing should stop us from that kind of worship. In fact, in the story, some of the Pharisees, Sadducees, and others, some of the people who are not big fans of Jesus, try to get the crowds to quiet down. They say to the disciples and Jesus, "Hey, knock the racket off. Stop the riffraff. Stop the hubbubaloo. Stop impacting and changing people's lives. Stop changing and impacting our city. Stop changing and impacting our world with this message and declaration that you guys have. Knock it off, will ya?" Jesus' reply. If they kept quiet, the stones along the road would burst into cheers. Creation itself, in recognition of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, is declaring the glory and activity of God so that we would believe and be changed, transformed. So our cities would be changed, transformed, and our world would be changed and transformed. Christian worship is about knowing God's love, knowing Him and His person and what He's done for you, and sharing that same love, that same message with the people around you, especially those not here yet. I hope you experience worship today and in this coming week. For the moment, let's worship by praying. Would you please pray with me to close? Gracious God, we do praise you, we thank you, we declare that you have come unto this world. We recognize it, we receive humbly your activity in our world and in our lives. We humbly recognize, Jesus, you came to this world, to this earth, that you came to Jerusalem, that you came to the cross, that you would offer up your life in sacrifice for us and for our well-being out of your love, out of your character. You came here, and now you beckon us to be changed and moved by faith in you, and to bring that to others, that our worship would lead us into relationship and declaration with more people about who you are and what you've done. So as we lift our songs today, as we lift our prayers, as we give generously, as we serve faithfully, allow these things to be ways in which you build us up in faith, where you remind us of who you are, where we can sing it over ourselves, and we can sing it over our brothers and sisters in faith. We pray that those around us, seated beside us, would hear, know, and experience worship today, our worship, that it might be a gift to them, that we could believe for them, and that they might be inspired and encouraged to believe as well. Change us and transform us, Lord, in this worship, as we receive again what you have done for us and seek to share it with others. We humbly ask and pray this, Jesus Christ, in your holy and in your precious name. Amen.